check to make sure. Yes, we are live. Okay, and alive. Every day we thank Krishna for allowing us to be alive. This is very, very good. Okay, here we go. All right, we'll chat as we normally do. Let's find a nice song. Oh, Sheila Prabhupada ki jai. All righty. Oh, here's a nice one. Jeev Jago by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Jeev Jago, Purachanda Bodai. Jeev Jago, Purachanda Bodai. Gotanindra Yamaya Visat Jirago. Yawamaya Bisachiragunai Bhadiva Madhya say Samsara Vitare Mulia Vile Dume Avijarapa Bhadiya say Samsara Vitare Yamire to me Avichara Pure Tomare like they have me I knew Avatara Harinam Mama Mantra Lauturi Magi Eleche Shoni Maya Nachi Baronagi Nam Mama Mantra Lauturi Magi Makati Wakati Vinora Prabhu Charane Bodhiya Say Hari Nama Mantra Lo Charane Moria, Sri Harinam Mantra, Loino Maria, Chijago, Chijago, Gorachandra, Ole, Uda, Nitranya, Maya, Isachirako. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaco, Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravidikacharya Alstuteta Sitashi Shimad His Divine Grace Savaya Chaitanya Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ventakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shiva Siddhi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Sai Mucukunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Mathuranam Ki Jai Jagannath Swami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutle Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharani Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Deja Tarani. Okay. So, we're going to continue with our Krishna book reading, but first we'll read the translation to this prayer by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Lord Gaurachandra is calling. Wake up, sleeping soul. Wake up, sleeping soul. How long will you sleep in the lap of the witch called Maya? You have forgotten the way of devotional service and are lost in the cycle of birth and death. I have descended just to save you. I am your only true friend. Other than me, what friend do you have? I have brought the medicine that will wipe out the disease of illusion from which you suffer. Take this great chant for deliverance, Maha Mantra, the names of Hari. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, falling at the Lord's lotus feet, takes shelter of the Hari Nama Mantra, the Lord's holy names. So, wonderful. And actually, that's our main business. If you have problems, the panacea. Panacea means the cure for everything. Any material problem you have, spiritual problem. Of course, you should also do other things too. Obviously, you have to eat and you have to take care of your body. But really, the cure, ultimate cure for all problems is the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And one of the things that impressed me when I first came in contact with Krishna consciousness was that by chanting, I could always have my best friend with me. And Krishna is the best friend according to 529 in the Gita, Bhoktaram Jakatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suradam Sarvabhutanam Gatva Mam Shantim Richati, where Krishna says, I'm the enjoyer, the ultimate focus of all sacrifices. I'm the Lord of all the worlds. And Suradam Sarvabhutanam, I am the friend of all living entities. So Krishna is ultimately our friend. And every time you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna is with you. Remember that. That'll help you be attentive. Because even if you do have some material desire, at least you can approach Krishna. Kama sarva kama moksha kama dharadi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purasham puram. So remember, every time you say Krishna, Krishna is personally there. Not impersonally, not simply his energy. Although Krishna is imbued his holy names with all of his Shaktis, that is true. But apart from the Shakti aspect, Krishna is personally there. I'm emphasizing this again and again and again. He's personally there with you, as Prabhupada would sometimes say, dancing on the tip of your tongue and responding to your pleas. P-L-E-A-S. Please. That means entreaties. So we have him with us no matter what, wherever you are in any circumstance. Niyamena Tishtan. What is that? There's no hard and fast rules. Anywhere you could chant and everywhere. Okay, with that in mind, we will go to the Krishna book. So, Om Gana Timiranda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Meritam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. And we have to be assured that before we met Prabhupada, we were blinded in the darkness of ignorance. We knew nothing. And once we met Prabhupada, then everything was revealed. Yasmin vigate sarvam evam vigatam bhavati. Because you know the purpose of everything, you know the goal of everything, you know the process of achieving that goal, you know everything. It's amazing. By Prabhupada's mercy, please always serve and follow Prabhupada. That is my humble request. Okay, so let us go on. And we share the screen. We're on chapter 51, in the middle of the whole Mucukunda story. Now, if you don't remember who Mucukunda was, I'm going to briefly tell you what we went over yesterday. Here we go. Let me just set the screen up so I can see everything. Mucukunda was a great king in the Ikshvaku dynasty who fought for the demigods. And they were so pleased with him, he was asked, if you want a benediction, you can have a benediction, whatever you want. And he said, I'm just tired. I just want to go to sleep. And anyone who disturbs me, I will have the power to burn them to ashes. Okay. Meantime, when it was time for Muchukunda to wake up, Krishna was running away from this Yavana, Kali Yavana. That's interesting. Kali Yavana. He was definitely Yavana, even in his name. So Krishna was running away from Kali Yavana, and as he was running away from Kali Yavana, that's one of his aspects of his opulences, Krishna's opulence, is that he is Ranchor. Ranchor means basically running away. Usually that's used in relationship to Krishna running away from Jarasandha after Jarasandha attacked Mathura for the final time. So anyway, but Krishna is known as Ranchor. This is opulence of renunciation. And for Kshatriya, that's extreme renunciation, to run away from the battlefield. Oh my God. So, Anyway, so Krishna was running away from this Kalyavana, and he entered the cave where Muchukunda was sleeping. Krishna hid out, and Kalyavana saw Muchukunda, but he thought it was Krishna covered by a blanket. And so he kicked the person who he thought was Krishna. Muchukunda woke up and he blasted Kalyavana with the flames coming from his eyes, and Kalyavana was immediately immolated or cremated. Didn't have to hire cremation at that particular point. Anyway, so this is the interaction we're reading right now. Sort of the end of the chapter. The interaction between Krishna and Muchukunda. It's not Muchukunda. Muchukunda would be a dirty lake. So remember, pronounce your words properly. Okay, let's go. When Lord Krishna ordered King Muchukunda to ask a benediction from him, the king was joyful, and he immediately remembered the prediction of Gargamuni, who had foretold long before that in the 28th millennium of Vaivasvata Manu, Lord Krishna would appear on this planet. As soon as he remembered this prediction, he understood that the Supreme Person, Narayana, was present before him as Lord Krishna. He immediately fell down at his lotus feet and began to pray as follows. My dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, I can understand that all living entities on this planet are illusioned by your external energy and enamored of the illusory satisfaction of sense gratification. It's a fact. Being fully engaged in illusory activities, they are reluctant to worship your lotus feet, and because they are unaware of the benefits of surrendering unto your lotus feet, they are subjected we are subject to various miserable conditions of material existence. They are foolishly attached to the so-called society, friendship, and love, which merely produce different kinds of miseries. That's a fact. Illusioned by your external energy, everyone, whether man or woman, is attached to this material existence, and all are engaged in cheating one another in the great society of the cheaters and the cheated. In other words, everyone's competing with each other for the resources. We find this. These foolish persons, not knowing how fortunate they are to have obtained this human form of life, are reluctant to worship your lotus feet. By the influence of your external energy, they are attached to the glare of material activities, to so-called society, friendship, and love, like dumb animals that have fallen into a dark well. Wow, what an explanation. The example of a dark well is given because in the fields there are many wells unused for years and covered over by grass, and poor animals, not knowing of them, fall into them, and unless rescued they die. Being captivated by a few blades of grass, the animals fall into a dark well and meet death. Similarly, foolish persons, without knowing the importance of the human form of life, spoil it simply for sense gratification and die without any useful purpose. My dear Lord, I am not an exception to this universal law of material nature. I am also a foolish person who has wasted his time for nothing, and my position is especially difficult. On account of my being situated in the royal order, I was more puffed up than ordinary persons. An ordinary man thinks he is the proprietor of his body or his family, but I began to think in that way on a larger scale. I wanted to be the master of the whole world, and as I became puffed up with the ideas of sense gratification, my bodily concept of life became stronger and stronger. My attachment for a home, wife, and children, for money and supremacy over the world became more and more acute. In fact, it was limitless. So I remained always attached to the thoughts of my material living conditions. So this is actually similar to what, or how we were responding to a question about Krishna satisfying the desires, otherwise desires don't get satisfied. Krishna satisfies the desires by giving us him, his lotus feet. But Krishna does not satisfy our desires by giving us the object that we have of those desires necessarily, because then we get further inflamed, like Avritam Ganamaitena Gyanino Nichavarana kamarupena kuntaya, dushparena lenacha. Therefore, there is no satisfaction of material desires by material means. That is a truism. It is absolutely a fact. And if you don't believe me, try it out yourselves and waste a lot of time. Therefore, my dear Lord, I wasted so much of my valuable time with no benefit. As my misconception of life intensified, I began to think of this material body, which is just a bag of flesh and bones, as the all in all. And in my vanity, I believed I had become the king of human society. In this misconception of bodily life, I traveled all over the world accompanied by my military strength, soldiers, charioteers, and elephants and horses. Assisted by many commanders and puffed up by power, I could not trace out your lordship, who always sit within my heart as the most intimate friend. I did not care for you, and this was the fault of my so-called exalted material condition. I think that, like me, all living creatures are careless about spiritual realization and are always full of anxieties, thinking, what is to be done? What's next? But because we are strongly bound by material desires, we continue to remain in craziness. It's something like a rat or a hamster inside one of these wheels. You know, sometimes people keep pets of rats or hamsters, and there's like a wheel there, which they just run on, and the wheel keeps going round, and they don't get anywhere. Yet, in spite of being so absorbed in material thought, inevitable time, which is the only form of yourself, which is only a form of yourself, is always careful about its duty, and as soon as the allotted time is over, your lordship immediately ends all the activities of our material dreams. As the time factor, you end all our activities as a hungry black snake swiftly swallows up a small rat without leniency. Like in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, what? Kalo asmi, I am time. Also, he says another thing that's really frightening. He says, Mrityu sarva haraschaham. I am all devouring death. Phew. Due to the action of cruel time, the royal body, which was always decorated with golden ornaments during my life, and which moved on a chariot drawn by beautiful horses or on the back of an elephant nicely decorated with golden ornaments, and which was advertised as the king of human society, that same royal body decomposes under the influence of inevitable time and becomes fit for being eaten by worms or insects, or being turned into ashes or the stool of an animal. That's the destination of our body. This beautiful body may be recognized as a royal body while in a living condition, but after death, the body of even a king is eaten by an animal and therefore turned into stool, or is cremated in a crematorium, or turned into ashes, or is put into an earthly grave where different kinds of worms and insects are produced of it. Whew. Oh my God. Why are we so attached to this body? My dear Lord, we come under the full control of this inevitable time, not only after death, but also in a different way while living. For example, I may be a powerful king, and yet when I come home after conquering the world, I become subjected to many material conditions. When I come back victorious, all subordinate kings may come and offer their respects. But as soon as I enter the inner section of my palace, I myself become an instrument in the hands of the queens, and for sense gratification I have to fall down at the feet of women. The material way of life is so complicated that before taking the enjoyment of material life, one has to work so hard that there is scarcely an opportunity for peacefully enjoying. And to attain all material facilities, one has to undergo severe austerities and penances and be elevated to the heavenly planets if one gets the opportunity to take birth in a very rich or royal family. Even then, he is always anxious to maintain the status quo and prepare for the next life by performing various sacrifices and distributing charity. Even in royal life, one is full of anxieties, not only because of political administration, but also in regard to being elevated to the heavenly planets. It reminds me of an example I give sometimes. That someone's working very hard, 8 hours a day, traveling to the office 1 hour, traveling back 1 hour. And so, that's like 10 hours a day. Then they got home, then they eat, and then they go to sleep, and then they wake up the next morning and start the whole cycle again, because you've got 10 hours. 10 of your best hours of the day are taken just maintaining things. And when do you get a chance to enjoy the fruits of your labor? Well, if you're lucky, during the vacation period or on the weekends. But that's a very small percentage of the total time that you have. Most of the time you're working or anxiety or sleeping or doing something that's not giving you, a great amount of happiness, unless you like sleeping a lot, which I don't. It is therefore very difficult to get out of material entanglement, but if one is somehow or other favored by you, by your mercy alone, he is given the opportunity to associate with a pure devotee. That is the beginning of liberation from the entanglement of material conditioned life. My dear Lord, only by the association of pure devotees is one able to approach your lordship, who are the controller of both the material and spiritual existence. Should be who is the controller. Anyway, somehow I would have edited this a little differently. You are the supreme goal of all pure devotees, and by association with pure devotees, one can develop his dormant love for you. Therefore, development of Krishna consciousness and the association of pure devotees is the cause of liberation from this material entanglement. And the Chaitanya Charitamrita says, even a moment's association with a pure devotee. Of course, if you're not careful, association with a pure devotee can drag you down, because, basically why? Because you're committing offenses. So Prabhupada compared association with a pure devotee to one's exposure to the sun. The sun can purify one, it can heat one, but it also can damage one. It can burn you. Or fire is the same thing. If not properly applied, fire can kill you. And properly applied, then fire can cook your prasadam. So Prabhupada said it's very dangerous for a neophyte to associate too closely with a pure devotee, or to associate too closely with the deities, because one has to be really careful. My dear Lord, you are so merciful that in spite of my being reluctant to associate with your pure devotees, you have shown your extreme mercy upon me as a result of my slight contact with such a pure devotee as Garga Muni. By your causeless mercy only have I lost all my material opulences, my kingdom, my family. I do not think I could have gotten rid of all these entanglements without your causeless mercy. So kings and emperors sometimes accept the life of an ascetic to forget their royal life. But by your special mercy, I have already been bereft of royalty. I do not need to become a mendicant or practice renunciation. The reason he's saying that is that he was fighting for the demigods for many years, at least according to demigod time. And those many years in the demigod time was eons and eons of time on the earth planet. Time is experienced differently when one is in the heavenly planets or higher planets than when one is in the lower planets. So, anyway, oh my God, I keep getting messages. Don't worry, you didn't commit offenses. You're serving the deities. So anyway, serving the deities with love and devotion, fulfilling my heart's desire. So the point is, because he was fighting for the demigods for so many years, and so many eons went by on the earth planet, then guess what? Everybody who knew him, everybody who knew the people knew him, everybody, their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, great-great-great-great-grandchildren, nobody even remembered them. Therefore, everything was gone. His wife, children, everything. Yeah, but nobody even remembered who they were. My dear Lord, I therefore pray that I may simply be engaged in rendering transcendental loving service unto your lotus feet. This is the ambition of pure devotees who are freed from all material contamination. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you can offer me anything I want, including liberation. But who is such a fool that after pleasing you, he would ask from you something that might cause entanglement in the material world? I don't think any sane man would ask such a benediction from you. So, of course, there's that typical story Prabhupada told of the old lady who was carrying firewood. She dropped the firewood. She was carrying it all on her head. And she started crying out for Krishna. Krishna appeared, and Krishna said, "What do you want?" And she said, "Please put the firewood back on my head." So that's what we were doing. We were asking Krishna to put the burden back on our shoulders, or even to increase the burden. I therefore surrender unto you because you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You are the Super Soul living in everyone's heart, and you are the impersonal Brahman effulgence. Moreover, you are also this material world because this material world is only a manifestation of your external energy. So Krishna is the material world and is not the material world simultaneamente. That means simultaneously, because he is because it's his energy, and he is not because he's not the material energy. Anyway, I think you get it. Therefore, from any angle of vision, you are the supreme shelter for everyone. Whether on the material plane or the spiritual plane, everyone must take shelter under your lotus feet. I therefore submit unto you, my Lord. For many, many births I have been suffering from the threefold miseries of this material existence, and I am now tired of it. That's how we should feel. I am tired. Too much. I've been impelled only by my senses, and I was never satisfied. I therefore take shelter of your lotus feet, which are the source of all peaceful life and which can eradicate all lamentation caused by material contamination. My dear Lord, you are the super soul of everyone, and you can understand everything. Now I am free from all contamination of material desire. I wish I could say that. I do not wish to enjoy this material world, nor do I wish to take advantage of merging into your spiritual effulgence, nor do I wish to meditate upon your localized aspect of Paramatma, for I know that simply by taking shelter of you, I shall become completely peaceful and undisturbed. On hearing this statement by King Muchukunda, Lord Krishna replied, "My dear king, I am very much pleased with your statement. You have been the king of all the lands on this planet, but I am surprised to find that your mind is now freed from all material contamination. You are now fit to execute devotional service." Wow, prerequisite. I am most pleased to see that although I offered you the opportunity to ask from me any kind of benediction, you did not take advantage of asking for material benefits. I can understand that your mind is now fixed in me and is not disturbed by any material quality. The material qualities are three, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. When one is placed into the mixed material qualities of passion and ignorance, various kinds of greed and lusty desires impel him to try to find comfort in this material world. When situated in the material quality of goodness, one tries to purify himself by performing various penances and austerities. When one reaches the platform of a real Brahmin, he aspires to merge into the existence of the Lord. But when one desires only to render service unto the lotus feet of the Lord, he is transcendental to all these three qualities. The pure Krishna conscious person is therefore always free from all material qualities. Wow. My dear king, Lord Krishna continued, I offered to give you any kind of benediction just to test how much you have advanced in devotional service. Now I can see that you are on the platform of the pure devotees, for your mind is not disturbed by any greedy or lusty desires of this material world. The yogis who try to elevate themselves by controlling the senses and who meditate upon me by practicing the breathing exercise of pranayama are not so thoroughly freed from material desires. It has been seen in several cases that as soon as there is allurement, such yogis again come down to the material platform. So the vivid example verifying this statement is Vishwamitra Muni. Vishwamitra Muni was a great yogi who practiced pranayama, breathing exercise. But when he was visited by Menaka, a society woman of the heavenly planets, he lost all control and begot in her a daughter named Shakuntala. Actually, this is a really interesting story in the Bhagavatam. Yeah, Shakuntala, he and Menaka just didn't take care of her. And she was left in the care of vultures. That's why she was called Shakuntala. And then Shakuntala was taken care of by a sage named Kanva Muni. And then Kanva Muni was taking care of her very nicely. But one day, King Dushmanta came, and when Kamramuni was out of town or went out for the day or something, and he fell in love with Shakuntala and had some sort of Gandharva marriage with her. And there was a kid born, but he left her before the kid was born. I mean, left her after maybe a few hours or something like that. And he said, you should come and become my queen. Later on, she went with the kid to claim her position as the queen, and the king Dushmanta actually didn't recognize her because she had some sort of curse. And eventually, after, there's a whole story about a ring there, because she was given a ring by which she could recognize, and that ring was actually eaten by a fish. But anyway, don't have time to tell the whole story. But eventually, he accepted her, and that child was Bart, after whom this world is named, Bhartavarsha. Anyway, so it had some plan, but you're losing control of your senses and doing whatever you're going to do is not part of the Lord's plans. It's part of your being in absolute Maya. So don't think, oh, this is a pastime. It ain't a pastime. Just like Lord Shiva, when he wanted to understand what lust was about, he left his body and took the body of a king that had recently died, and the king hung around for a little while longer. It was Lord Shiva inside. That, of course, that's Shankaracharya. And then he came back and was able to understand and defeat someone who he was having an argument with. But you shouldn't think, I want to understand what lust is like. No, you will not understand. You will be entangled in lust. Just be really careful. Don't want to be or have any sahajas in our movement. But the pure devotee Haridas Thakur was never disturbed, even when all such allurements were offered by a prostitute and also by Maya Devi herself. My dear king, Lord Krishna continued, I therefore give you with a special benediction that you will always think of me. Thus you will be able to traverse the material world freely without being contaminated by the material qualities. This statement by the Lord confirms that a person in true Krishna consciousness, engaged in the transcendental lover service of the Lord under the direction of the spiritual master, is never subjected to the contamination of material qualities. That is, if one's absorbed. My dear king, the Lord said, because you are a Kshatriya, you have committed the offense of slaughtering animals both in hunting and political engagements. To become purified, just engage yourself in the practice of Bhakti Yoga and always keep your mind absorbed in me. Very soon you will be freed from all reactions to such sordid activities. In this statement it appears that although Kshatriyas are allowed to kill animals in hunting, they are not freed from the resultant contamination of sinful reactions. Therefore, whether one is a Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Brahmin, one is recommended to take sannyas at the end of life to engage himself completely in the service of the Lord and thus become freed from all sinful reactions of past life. Now, the preferable stage of sannyas in Kali Yuga is called Kshetra sannyas. One can remain with one's family, but there's no more sense gratification, and dedicate one's full time to serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead and Srila Prabhupada's mission. The Lord then assured King Muchukunda, in your next life you will take birth as a first-class Vaishnava, the best of Brahmins, and that life your only business will be to engage in my transcendental service. A Vaishnava is a first-class Brahmin because one who has not acquired the qualification of a bona fide Brahmin cannot come to the platform of Vaishnava. When one becomes a Vaishnava, he is completely engaged in welfare activities for all living entities. The highest welfare activity for living entities is the preaching of Krishna consciousness. Remember that. And assisting those who are preaching. It is stated herein that those who are specifically favored by the Lord can become absolutely Krishna conscious and be engaged in the work of preaching the Vaishnava philosophy. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 51st chapter of Krishna, the deliverance of Mucukunda. I don't know if we should go ahead or not. Anyway, maybe we'll just leave more time for questions. rather than starting a new chapter today. Because this next chapter is very important. It's about Krishna. We mentioned the word ranchor. That means someone who runs away from the battlefield. So in this chapter, we're going to read about, in the next chapter, we're going to read about Krishna actually running away from Jarasandha as Jarasandha is attacking Mathura. Of course, as we read previously, Jarasandha basically, uh, after attacking Krishna like 17 times, Jarasandha, let's see, impelled Krishna to protect the residents of Mathura by transferring everybody to Dwarka and building a nice city under the direction of Vishwakarma in Dwarka, and surrounding Dwarka by a very high wall. And Dwarka was in the sea. So in any ways, or any words, it was impregnable. No one could enter into Dwarka. It was protected from all sides. Of course, later on, there was an airplane that attacked Dwarka, and that, of course, was our friend Shalva. Shalva had an airplane, and we're going to read about that later on in Krishna Book, and how the airplane was shot down. So that's another story. So anyway, so Krishna ran away from Jarasandha. That's what we're going to read about. And of course, in the story of Muchukunda, Krishna was running away from Kalyavana. So Krishna, because he has no false ego, he didn't care what people said about him. He just did what he thought was best. And so in the story Krishna the Ranchor, we'll hear not only how Krishna ran away from Jarasandha, but actually jumped off a mountain that was many miles high after Jarasandha set the mountain on fire. And ultimately, Krishna arranged for Jarasandha to be killed by Bhimsen, who split Jarasandha in two. But that story also is coming up soon. Okay, let us stop sharing. And now you have more time for questions. Let me just unmute everybody. So usually we run short of time in the questions and answer period, so we'll just give everybody more questions, more opportunities to ask questions. Okay, who wants to ask a question? Now is your opportunity. There's plenty of time. Raise your hand, type in the text window, or unmute yourself. Okay, Gopal, you have a question. You can unmute yourself.
Please accept my obeisance, Srila Gurudev.
Haribol.
Kalyavana, I remember taking a course many, many years ago from His Holiness Bhakti Swami about the representation of different demons in Krishna's pastimes. And Kalyavana represented something, and I cannot remember what it is. Do you remember?
Don't remember. I mean, I can just look it up.
And I was doing that in another window too.
Let's see, it represents. No, can't find the information. No, I mean, it's not in Prabhupada's books and whatever. So, generally, I know the demons who try to attack Krishna and the Brajabasis in Vrindavan.
Yeah.
But I'm not so familiar with the demons outside of Vrindavan, who they are, what they represent. All right?
On Wikipedia, it says that he's a partial incarnation of Crota.
Anger.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely was angry. I don't know if he represents the incarnation. Well, obviously, if he's a partial incarnation, he must represent anger. That's an anartha.
Mm.
How do you get rid of anger? You run away from it.
Let somebody else take it.
Yeah, actually, the method that I suggest as far as dealing with anger is to be aware of it. I am angry before you start beating anyone up or expressing it externally. I am angry because, and take responsibility. Don't think that you made me angry or he or she made me angry, but take responsibility for it. I am angry because of my own needs, my own unfulfilled needs, and whatever that need is, and you take responsibility, and then you can deal with anger. And
Mm.
as long as you don't take responsibility for it, you just like push it off on someone else, then you're really not going to be able to dissipate it or deal with it, even if you try to suppress it or repress it, because it'll pop out. Just like I use the example of a balloon, that if you push one side of the balloon in, if you happen to be someone who plays with balloons, we have one devotee here who's very expert with balloons. Uh, and I've seen her make different animals and different figures with balloons. So she pushes one side in, it pops out another side. So if you push it in, you repress, suppress. There's a difference between repress and suppress. Repress means you're aware of it. I mean, you're not aware of it. Sorry, I got the opposite. Means you're not aware of it. You deny even to yourself that you have this particular type of anartha, like anger. And suppress means you're aware of it, but you're just holding back. You're just breathing like a suppressed anger. So either case, it comes out eventually. It may come out as some other anartha, may come out as some other bad characteristic. So, any other questions, Gopal? No, yes, no. So, here's another question from Atmanandini. My understanding is that when we say we're not the body, we mean both gross and subtle body. So this means that rather than our gross body, our subtle body needs more attention working on it, as it is the subtle body that carries on and shapes our next life. But we tend to associate with the gross body when we say we're not the body. You are absolutely right. Because if you take care of the subtle body is the one of designations. That is, your attachments. I mean, you get rid of the attachments, you get rid of the suffering or the attachment to the gross body. I mean, the attachments come from the mind and intelligence and false ego. Attachments don't come from the body. The body is simply according to Krishna, a yantra. Yantra Rudani Maya. Yantra means like it's a machine. And your subtle body is actually what you have to work on. That's why Savaimana Krishna Padara Vindyo. So the whole point is to fix the mind on Krishna. Controlling the mind. If you're able to control the mind, which is in the example given of the chariot, which is the reins, then you're going to be able to control the pancha indriya, the five senses. So yes, we generally think we're not the body in terms of this biomucus air and otherwise nice thing that we're carrying around with us. It gets old. The subtle body doesn't get old. The subtle body can change its conceptions, its attachments, its misunderstandings, its desires, but the gross body changes automatically with time. The subtle body changes with samskaras. The word samskara means impressions. It also means like performances, like the Garbhadan Sanskara, the Antyeshti Sanskara. It also means performances that create an impression in the minds of, or the subtle body, in the minds or subtle body of a particular living entity. So the subtle body becomes influenced by impressions and by association, karnam guna sangasha. Sada says, karnam guna sangasha, said Janma Jonishu, by associating with the modes of nature. So yes, we have to really understand that our understanding We have to understand that our understanding, conceptions, designations, and everything, that's our subtle body, which we are not. And that's really hard. It's harder to distinguish. How do we distinguish between the soul and the subtle body? It's a question of reading Prabhupada's books, understanding the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and then ultimately, if you read Prabhupada's books and understand the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, then at that particular point you'll be able to distinguish. If you have Shuddhabhimana, your mind is fixed on the lotus feet of Krishna Kavayamahi Rabo Shri Vrindavanam. Okay. Did I hear correctly that we should not get too close to a pure devotee? Could you please elaborate on that? I said that one has to be very careful. And so it's generally advocated for a neophyte to be very careful around pure devotees or around the deities. Why? Because they can be offenses. It's not an absolute injunction that don't get close to a pure devotee. I mean, we get close through sound vibration because generally our association with pure devotees is in separation through what we call Vani or Vani Seva. Vani means the words, instructions, example of a pure devotee, and Vapu means the physical manifestation of a pure devotee in this world. So, we see that many people who were Prabhupada's servants, they had spiritual difficulty later on because then after a while, some of them, not all of them, some of them began to consider or think that Prabhupada was an ordinary person. He's taking rest, he's eating, he's going to the bathroom, where the body is doing all these things. So there's a tendency to become, first of all, complacent, and then it may lead to critical behavior. So complacency comes first. Complacency means to take for granted. Oh yeah, it's him again. He's calling again for a chapati. He's taken too many chapatis. Why should he take more chapatis? We have this tendency to find fault in others. And that tendency is sometimes focused on Krishna's devotees. It's unfortunate. Good question. That's my elaboration. Oh, Krishna Priya, you can raise your hand. You have a question.
Jai Shilgurdev, please accept your obeisances.
Yep.
So, in the beginning of the class, we were talking about how we should always know that we're not alone, that Krishna is always with us, and
Right.
when we're chanting the holy name, he's there. So then also, how do we put these two things together when also it's explained by Srila Prabhupada and in our tradition that it's a mood of separation, that devotees always separation and
Whoops.
seeing Krishna.
Hold on a second. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So how to reconcile, on one hand, to know that Krishna is always with us, he's our best friend, he's with us, and at the same time develop that proper mood of longing and that mood of separation, which is shown to us by the previous acharyas and by Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, it's a balance. We know that Krishna is 100% there, but we can't see him. We feel him, we feel his presence, but we don't see him. Unless we're with the deities, then we don't actually see Krishna. So, based on that, we want to see Krishna. We want to directly, at least be aware that we're having a conversation with Krishna, have Krishna speak back to us, just like we read this story about King Mucukunda. Not only was he seeing Krishna, but Krishna was speaking to him. He was having a direct one-to-one conversation with him. And, we feel Krishna's presence, just like when you go into Vrindavan, you directly feel aprakata, Krishna's unmanifest presence. In other words, it's not manifest to you, but you can feel it. You can feel that he's there. So there's a difference. There's a difference. But, the pure devotee realizes Krishna is his holy name, but it's not exactly the same as having a conversation with Krishna. So it is exactly and not simultaneously. So it's hard to explain, especially from the standpoint of not being so pure. So, hope that answers that.
Thank you.
And here's the next question. I thought Bart Varsha was named after King Bart Jard Bart. Prabhupada says both things. Prabhupada says sometimes, if you read the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada says sometimes it's taken that Bart Varsha is named after Bart, who was the son of Dushmanta. And sometimes it's taken that Bart Varsha was named after Bart, who was the son of Rishabhadev, who became Jadabart. Anyway, so Prabhupada mentions that. So either way, Prabhupada says there's two Barts. You can read that in the Bhagavatam. Okay, who else has a question? Wow. You got 3 more minutes. Anybody have a question? You could type. You could raise your hand. Or you can unmute yourself if you're bold enough. I guess no one's bold enough. Okay, I guess we will end for the evening or the morning, depending on where you are. Thank you all very much for listening so attentively. And it really encourages me that everyone is listening so attentively to my humble attempts to explain Krishna consciousness by reading Prabhupada's books. Okay, on that happy note, all glory is to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, ki